the sideboards. To Iginla in the corner. Back to Crosby. He shoots, he scores! It's over! It's over! It's over!
Olympic glory has shone a light on Canada. The pride is palpable. The nation, inspired by visions of gold. For most, from the plains of Alberta to the bars of Ontario, it's a great time to be Canadian. For others, though, their pride is tempered by fear. Fear that their freedoms are being usurped in one of the world's greatest nations.
You ask me the question, what would a Bill of Rights do for you? A national Bill of Rights would safeguard our freedoms of religion, speech, press, radio, and association. It would declare the equality of all Canadians and would take a forthright stand against discrimination based on color, creed, or racial origin.
Democracy is an inexact experiment. It requires a gathering of the willing, citizens working to guarantee the preservation of fundamental constitutional and personal freedoms. Without that, the freedoms are chipped away, lost in a cloud of endless bureaucracy, a vehicle for the powerful against the rest of us.
Publicity is an antiseptic against bureaucratic and executive orders that deny freedom. Publicity will make Canadians freedom conscious and will make governments mindful and careful before they do the things that destroy or suspend any of the constitutional freedoms of this country.
It's been 50 years since Stephen Baker passed the Bill of Rights. Who are the heroes of this age? Who indeed?
After 3 days and 3 nights of fierce bargaining, the First Ministers had at last agreed on a new constitution, on the ground rules that will shape Canadian society for decades to come.
In the 1980s, Pierre Trudeau's Canada finally became a fully sovereign nation. He patriated the Constitution, established Canada's policy of multiculturalism and bilingualism, and assured Canada's leadership in the League of Nations. Trudeau thought he had safeguarded constitutional rights once and for all. Today, however, cracks are apparent in his pride and joy, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The foundation of liberty he spent a lifetime constructing is beginning to wobble off its axis.
Code 2 incident 5401 RD 859.
This happened on September 11th, 2000.
Code 2 clear.
Over 9 years later, you're still traumatized by this.
Yeah, it's still affecting us. Absolutely it is.
Tell me a little bit about that day.
It was 11:15 at night. We were actually sitting at our dining room table, and there was this bang, bang, bang on the door. And as I opened the door, he had his gun straight out, and it was aimed straight at my head. And as he's at my right side, and he said, "Don't move." He moves in front of me, and that gun stayed on my head. He told me to get back and get on the floor, and I just, by this time, collapsed. And thoughts are going through my head like, holy crap, what's going on here? I gotta call the police. How can I call the police? This is the police. It was terrifying.
As frightening as this must have been, this is not a story about police brutality. Rather, Nancy's story symbolizes how government actions can disrupt our lives in a heartbeat.
Police, open up!
It was 5 Canadian RCMP officers.
Am I under arrest?
Broke down the door of his house, came in, and he awoke with a gun to his head.
The lead person holds a gun towards my wife.
It was invasive, it was wrong, and people got hurt.
These stories had never been told, right?
They rushed through the office and gathered everybody up and treated us like common criminals.
That day changed my perception of what my government was really actually about.
I remember sitting on the floor, and these 2 officers are going up the stairs to this room where these kids are sleeping. I was so afraid that, you know, one of these cops would step on a toy or kick something and a kid would jump up and boom. I had nightmares for months, and that's all I could see.
It's a cautionary tale because it could happen to any of us, anytime, anywhere. What befell Nancy is happening across Canada, and for some very strange reasons. While Canada sleeps, government agencies are stealing people's sovereignty, bit by bit.
Freedoms are something that the courts are moving away from. Individual freedoms anyway. The Charter of Rights gives certain individual freedoms, but those freedoms can be taken away provided you abide by the strictures of Section 1.
In most democracies, the courts offer equilibrium to government ministers and elected officials, while providing citizens fair protection from the state. In Canada, because of a loophole in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the courts are actually encouraged to defer to government. This has shifted the balance of power dramatically and means that many civil liberties are in limbo.
The deference to government runs through a lot of our new laws and regulations, and by deferring to government, when the courts defer to government, they allow the government's story to take sway, and as a result they abrogate individual freedoms.
Attorney Sean Buckley has seen the damage this has inflicted upon individual rights. He has been locked in legal battles with Health Canada, one of the government's most powerful agencies. Increasingly, they have imposed their will on individuals and businesses through police raids and legislative coups d'etats.
We had Bill C-51, Bill C-52 come along, and now we've got, Bill C-6. It's passed our House of Commons, that in the area of consumer products allows Health Canada inspectors, they can walk into your business, they can seize the whole thing just based on their impression that there can be a safety risk and you're non-compliant. And in some circumstances, the property becomes state property without any court supervision. And it begs the question, have consumer products all of a sudden become so dangerous that we have to give up the rule of law?
Buckley and tens of thousands of others are fighting legislation aimed at giving the agency even more power.
Protesting Bill C-51.
The act looks too broad, too far-reaching, too vague.
I'm very, very concerned about the way that our government is moving forward and how they're not disclosing it to the public, and they're not really talking about how it's beneficial, how it's possibly negative. They're just saying that it's good for us and we're supposed to accept it.
Well, I think Bill C-6 is part of really a long line of bills which are continuing to grant more and more power to government and to government inspectors in this case, but we are giving up a lot to grant that power to them.
All of us store consumer products in our homes, and now we have inspectors who have the authority, the way this is written, to come into our homes to check for compliance or non-compliance with the Act.
Health Canada is immune from the law of trespass. They don't even have to be investigating you. They can be investigating your neighbor, but they can go into any one of your buildings except your house without a warrant. So you mean now the state can come into my garage, they can go into my shed, they can go into my business, investigating me criminally. It's the most dangerous thing that we can be doing as a people, and every single major political party in Parliament supported this.
This is Canada. Our homes are an oasis of privacy, and if one inspector comes into one home, that's one too many. It's poorly drafted, it's poorly worded, and it's unconstitutional.
The proposed Bill C-6 aims to better protect Canadians by preventing dangerous consumer products from being made or sold in Canada.
The main target of Bills C-51, C-6, and other controversial bills, falsely labeled as consumer protection bills, appears to be Canada's natural products industry, for reasons both vague and contradictory.
It's ironic to this old biology teacher that we teach our children in biology that these nutrients are absolutely essential, that minerals and vitamins play a certain role. They've been studied, they've been looked at, they're absolutely essential to life. We can't do without any of them. We'll die without any one of these nutrients. And then we'll turn around and regulate it as if they're dangerous. That's just ludicrous to me.
We actually want to get well, and a lot of us do not want to choose to use chemical pharmaceutical drugs. We want to choose to use other things, and we're going to continue to do it, whether it's legal or not.
More than 200 people gathered in Old Strathcona today protesting a new federal bill they say would severely limit their access to natural remedies.
If we are sovereign, what could be more fundamental than one's own health care, or what one puts in his or her own body? Evidently, the unelected bureaucrats at Health Canada do not agree. They think they know what's best for everyone, and they're willing to use violence, intimidation, and millions of taxpayer dollars to get their way.
Again, it's 6:30 here. It's 4:30 there. Please call me tonight. I'm not going to sleep. I'm scared.
This is a phone call from a woman suffering from bipolar disorder, and is one of thousands of calls registered after Health Canada seized a natural medicine product produced by an Alberta company called True Hope. True Hope's origins are rooted in tragedy. It was founded after Tony Stephan's wife committed suicide, and after his son Joseph and daughter Autumn began to exhibit serious symptoms of mental imbalances as well. Tony Stephan did what most of us would. He followed the advice of doctors and tried every psychiatric drug that was prescribed for his children. None of them worked.
So I was left in a terrible state where I had to find an answer, because you see, my family was literally coming unglued before my eyes. I was going to lose my family.
When Tony met David Hardy, he found someone willing to help. Over time, they formulated a product full of vitamins, herbs, and trace minerals, and began testing it on Tony's son Joseph. After a few weeks, an amazing thing happened. Joseph became well.
I remember about 6 weeks into this program that we sat together on the couch, and he said, "Where was I? What happened to me? Why was I so angry all the time?" I said, "Don't go there. You don't have to. Live the day now. You're here. Be in the present."
With Joseph well, Tony turned his attention to his daughter Autumn, who had already been institutionalized. She also became well, and her book on the subject later became a Canadian bestseller. Throughout Alberta, word began to spread. Others in the community began to ask for help. Tony and David supplied the product to friends and neighbors in need for free.
I remember the first schizophrenic we tried it on. A lady had been schizophrenic for 20 years. Think of that, 20 years of schizophrenia, unable to operate, 3 attempted suicides, no functionality, and in 90 days we bring her back. Her husband said, "Hey, this is the lady I married." Powerful. And that's what this has been.
David and Tony took their product to University of Calgary researcher Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, who began a rigorous clinical trial with what eventually became Empower Plus.
Some people call it a micronutrient sledgehammer because it's all of the vitamins and a very long list of dietary minerals. The patients in this sample got much better, in fact more than 50% better. Quite a few of them were more than 75% better.
After Dr. Kaplan revealed the impressive results to the Canadian Psychiatric Association, she was vilified by many in the mental health community. Health Canada immediately shut down the scientific trial. Then, they seized Empower Plus at the U.S.-Canadian border and banned it for sale in Canada. The final insult came as the agency conducted a guns-drawn raid at the True Hope offices in Raymond, Alberta.
They had completed about a $2 million expense to raid our operation. We ended up with one charge, which was selling without a DIN number. $2 million of harassment for a $300 fine.
But the question is, why? Why an extremely safe therapy elicited such an aggressive response from Health Canada?